all praises, all praises to the heavenly creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, the stars, the earth, the oceans, the mountains, the seas, all creeping things, humanity, and all there is. This is Revelations.UNVEILED.DETROIT, back again to make presentation to you, family, to the scattered tribes, wherever you may be, all over the globe. I continue to pray for your care and safety and security. And to my brothers and sisters of the world who refer to themselves as the melanated and Moors, the original man and children of God, the copper-colored, the colored, and people of color, the indigenous and aboriginals, the natives, Negroes and niggas, the African Americans and blacks, the descendants of slaves, and those conquered and colonized. We are here again today, family. And we are going on an escapade this evening of history. We will begin to get some clarity on some designations, nationalities, religions, and world politics. So this presentation was inspired again by my brother who goes by the former name of Superboy 223 and now is under the channel Your World on YouTube. In one of his presentations, he was outlining the behavior and the hypocrisy and the deflection of a group of people who is always in the midst of instigating turmoil, calamity, and confusion within our nation. So we are going to begin to peel back this onion, and as the historical tidbits come to me, I will add to this presentation. And as I think about it in the greater scheme, this presentation can actually be attached to the Willie Lynch series, because believe it or not, for those who didn't know, the transatlantic slave trade was financed by this group of people. The ships were insured, the chains were made, the ports were owned, and the plantations were owned by this group of people, who then took all of that money and centralized it into banks all over the world that we now call a Federal Reserve. So we will begin to know, so that after we know, we will act accordingly to the knowledge as we employ the wisdom with new spiritual eyes within our carnal existence. So we will begin with, who are these people? The greatest historian on the origin of the history of the so-called or self-styled Jews in Eastern Europe was Professor H. Graetz, himself a so-called or self-styled Jew. Professor Graetz points out in his famous History of the Jews that when so-called or self-styled Jews in other countries heard a rumor about so-called or self-styled Jews in the KHAZAR kingdom, they believed these converted KHAZARs to be the lost 10 tribes. These rumors were no doubt responsible for the legend which grew up that Palestine was the homeland of the converted KHAZARs. On page 141 of his History of the Jews, Professor H. Grates states, the KHAZARs professed a coarse religion, which was combined with sensuality and lewdness. After Obadiah came a long series of Jewish shagans, kings, for according to a fundamental law of the state, only Jewish rulers were permitted to ascend the throne. For some time, the Jews of other countries had no knowledge of the conversion of this powerful kingdom to Judaism. And when at last a vague rumor to this effect reached them, they were of the opinion that Khazaria was peopled by the remnant of the former 10 tribes. When the KHAZARs in the first century before Christ invaded Eastern Europe, their mother tongue was an Asiatic tongue or language, referred to in the Jewish encyclopedia as the KHAZAR languages. They were primitive Asiatic dialects without any alphabet or any written form. When King Bulan was converted in the 7th century, he decreed that the Hebrew characters he saw in the Talmud and other Hebrew documents was thereupon to become the alphabet for the KHAZAR language. The Hebrew characters were adopted to the phonetics of the spoken KHAZAR language. The KHAZARs adopted the characters of the so-called Hebrew language in order to provide a means for providing a written record of their speech. The adoption of the Hebrew characters had no racial, political, or religious implications. The Romans brought their alphabet with their culture to the uncivilized nations exactly like the rabbis brought the Hebrew alphabet from Babylon to the KHAZARs when they were introduced to writing in the form of the Talmud alphabet. The conversion of King Bulan and the KHAZAR nation in the 7th century accomplished for Talmudism or for Judaism, as Talmudism is Babylonian to the KHAZARs, as Talmudism is called today. Start that over. The conversion of King Bulan and the KHAZAR nation in the 7th century accomplished for Talmudism or for Judaism, as Talmudism is called today, what the conversion of Constantine and the Western European nations accomplished for Christianity. How genuine can the implications, inferences, and innuendos of the so-called brotherhood and interfaith movements be under these circumstances? These so-called movements are sweeping the nations like prairie fires. If the Talmud is the axis of the political, economic, and cultural and social attitudes and activities of the so-called or self-styled Jews participating in these two so-called movements, how genuine are the oaths, vows, or pledges taken or given in connection with these two so-called movements by so-called or self-styled Jews. It would be a superlative gesture of brotherhood or of interfaith if the national conferences of Christians and Jews succeeded in expunging from the Talmud all anti-Christ, anti-Christian, and anti-Christianity passages at a cost of many millions of dollars. The national conferences of churches and Jews succeeded in expunging from the New Testament passages which so-called or self-styled Jews regarded as offensive to their faith. A great portion of the cost was supplied by so-called or self-styled Jews. Christians might now supply funds to expunge from the Talmud passages offensive to the Christian faith. Otherwise, the so-called brotherhood and interfaith movements are merely mockeries. The daily study of the Talmud, which among Jews began with the age of 10 to the end with life itself, necessarily was a severe gymnastic for the mind, thanks to which it acquired incomparable subtlety and acumen, since it aspires to one thing: to establish for Judaism a corpus juris ecclesiasti. So, family, that is the introduction to those people, the KHAZARs, the so-called or self-styled Jew-ish people. So, we will conclude on that end, and I will also make this statement. They say they are Jewish. Oh well, so swell, no problem. But the slaves brought to America and their now descendants, wherever they sit, stand, or kneel within the borders of the 50 states and Puerto Rico, are of the tribe of Judah, of the nation of Israel. Judah is the king tribe of the nation of Israel. From Judah came King David, then King Solomon, then the line of kings, all the way to the Messiah, the Redeemer, the Savior, the King of Israel, was of the house of Judah. That's who we are. That's who we be. That is our blood. So, family, until we are together again, my continuous petition in prayer for your care and safety and security and harmony and peace as we persevere and endure, so that we may overcome this captivity and be righteous and ready for the return of the Holy Messiah, the Word of the Holy Creator of infinity made flesh. I love you. I love you. Family, I love you. Thank you, Brother Harvey.